Hi, and thanks for tuning into Street Life. I'm Natasha, and this is Season 1, Episode 1 of Rolling with RAQ. In this episode, I'll be recapping and discussing Power Book 3, Raising Kanan, Season 1, Episode 1, the series premiere back in the day. If you haven't seen the show as yet, I recommend going back and watching my preview episode where I provide an overview of the show, my favorite character, RAQ, and introduce some of the other characters. Okay, so from the very beginning, we see the show starts off with a flashback to 1985. Kanan at this point is about 10 years old. He's a cute little chubby kid at the park with his cousin Jukebox. They've gotten into a tussle with some other kids, right? Or particularly Kanan. Nothing major, just your regular schoolyard fight. But the thing here is that we find out apparently the kids hemmed up Kanan and took his money. It's important to know that it was him versus at least two kids beating him up, while another kid was holding Jukebox back so she couldn't jump in. He's still quite young, so the other boys are a little bit older. And with that, they're a bit larger than him, quite a bit larger than him. He stands up for himself, doesn't immediately run away, but he tries to defend himself and whatnot, but they pretty much just beat him up and embarrass him. Everybody's gathered around, the kids are watching, they're laughing, kind of instigating the situation. In that moment of embarrassment, he does what I think a lot of kids might do at that age, where it's sure, he's given it a good college try, attempted to stand up for himself, that didn't work, so plan B is to run home crying like a lamb. We see him running through the neighborhood, and this is pretty much what Queens still looks like now, but this is the 80s, and this part of Queens, South Jamaica Queens, was devastated by crack. So we see him run by some hustlers and addicts. It's a rough and tumble neighborhood. And in this kind of neighborhood, you running home after getting beat up like that is a terrible idea. It's one thing if he stood up for himself, took his lumps and went on about his business. That's not what happened. He runs home crying, but not necessarily to his mom. Instead, he runs upstairs to his room and in a rather dramatic fashion, throws himself on the bed. And this is the point at which we see his mom, RAQ, or Raquel Thomas, and her then boyfriend, High Post. These are not the Huxtables, as she has a bag of drugs in her hand and he's seated in front of a triple beam scale. This is the first glimpse that you get into his mom being a bit different, and it's explained that her boyfriend is really the one that got her into the drug business. It sounds like she might have been dibble-dabbling before, but he's the one that really got her fully into the game. It's worth noting, obviously he's a drug dealer, so that's not the greatest thing in the world. But for all intents and purposes, at least from the little bit that we see, he seems like a decent guy. Kanan says that he's nice to his mom, treats her well, in a voiceover. RAQ doesn't immediately run to see what's going on with Kanan, but when he runs in the house, she asks what's going on, what happened. High Post is sitting a bit closer to the door and notices that Kanan is crying, right? He looks like he got into a fight at the park. And he does what I think is a pretty nice thing in that he offers to go up and speak to Kanan. At this point, you don't really know anything about their lives, but Kanan narrates that this is his mom's boyfriend, not his father. Yet he's nice enough to offer to go up and speak with the boy. The neighborhood's a little bit rough and tumble, but High Post expresses without any judgment that Kanan might not be cut out for this neighborhood, right? Not every kid is built for this kind of environment. It was a kind gesture, which RAQ declines the offer. As Kanan is her son, she has faith that he can handle the neighborhood, so she goes up to talk to him herself. The problem here is twofold. The boys jump Kanan, but him running away is a more pressing issue. He will have problems going back to that park or really just walking through the neighborhood. What are you going to do? You're just going to stay in the front yard? Because you can't stay in the house all the time. You won't be able to go back to the park because people are going to figure that, Kanan is soft. He's not going to stand up for himself. If I want anything off of him, anything he has, I can take because all I've got to do is just rough him up a little bit and he's going to run away. You can't tolerate that. RAQ asks him some questions to figure out, what happened, what's going on. He explains to her what took place, the reality that he got jumped. And she figures out that he's been, talking about having money. Had he kept his mouth shut, they probably wouldn't have figured him as they wouldn't have found out that he was a potential victim of Mark, right? They probably wouldn't have done anything to him. But because he was in the park running his mouth, the kids decided they were going to take his stuff. They were going to take his money. Quickly assessing the situation, RAQ loads up some D-cell batteries into a sock and hands it to him as a makeshift weapon. You might look at that and say that's kind of wrong, especially for an adult. But you got to consider that, number one, Kanan was smaller than both of these boys. They were taking advantage of him by picking on him. And secondly, the fact that it's at least 2 or 3 of them, one of whom is holding Jukebox back, so it's not a fair fight. And even with that, Jukebox is a girl. Had he lost a fair fight, that would have been a different situation. Go ahead, take the L, go on about your day. But if you're both bigger than this kid, and the two of you jump him, then the playground's rule of engagement book goes out the window. He's well within his rights to even the fight up, especially because it sounds like they started it. The batteries were a little bit overboard, but I understand the rationale of it. Don't let anybody run you out of the park. Don't let anybody run you off or tell you where you can or can't go. That's number one. And secondly, these two little punks are cowards trying to be bullies, and you can't tolerate that. Stand up for yourself, because otherwise you're going to forever be a victim. This is the first glimpse that you get into RAQ, right? She shows concern. She doesn't yell at Kanan for him crying, but she's already thinking a few steps ahead and can see how things are going to shake out for him in the future. She did the smart thing by pushing him back out the house to return to the park. RAQ drives him back to the park and makes him confront the bullies. It's worth noting that she looks on like she obviously doesn't go out and fight the kids herself, which would be crazy, but she's rocking a mullet, multicolored old lady glasses, lime green nails, a green shearling, and jeans that hit about a good 9 inches above her belly button. But with confidence through the roof, she manages to pull it off. She's bad. But one thing that kind of struck me in that scene, and made me uncomfortable in some later scenes throughout the show, is that when Kanan runs home, she asks what happened, but the next question is, where was Jukebox? What exactly was Jukebox supposed to do? I mean, Jukebox tried, right? Jukebox is a year older than Kanan, but she's still a girl. Why are you looking at Jukebox to defend Kanan against a group of boys? With that, we move forward to 1991, when Kanan is now 15, while RAQ is about 30, 31. They're having a meeting with this guidance counselor, or she's a school principal, something like that, about him taking the entrance exam to one of the science high schools in New York. Never mind the details, but just know that it's a really good school. He has no interest, but is excited about the escalators. RAQ, meanwhile, thinks that going to this school with all of these resources would be a great opportunity for Kanan. It would also get him out of the neighborhood. The moment they step out of this woman's office, a fight breaks out. They're walking and talking. Kanan doesn't fully grasp why it is that she wants him to leave the neighborhood. He positions it as him leaving her and leaving her alone. But RAQ is grown. She doesn't really need Kanan. She spent however many years before him living, and she's an adult. She can and should take care of herself. She takes care of both of them. We see from the beginning she's smart, right? You pick up that she's smart. She's into astronomy. It's really the only thing that clicked for her in school. So she discusses this one constellation where this woman is thrown up in the stars and now spends eternity in the sky, fighting to hold on. There's several constellations on display, but it's telling that that's the specific one she's drawn to. In a way, it's foreshadowing for her character situation, in that this is what connects to her. This woman who's perceived as overstepping, right, finds herself in this position of essentially being on top of the world, right, in this case, in the sky. And in that position, she's just struggling to hold on, to keep it all together. And when I first watched, I thought it was an interesting thing, but as I saw more of RAQ in her life, it made sense that that was the particular constellation she connected to. This woman seemingly on top of the world, struggling to hold on. She tells Kanan that she has big plans for him, and going to this school would fit perfectly into them. This kid is a teenager. I understand you having big dreams for him, but it sounds like you're just now sharing these plans with him. Why haven't you been having these conversations? He's gone through his childhood. He's now a teen. I have these plans for you. I haven't shared them. It's something that you pick up on later on in the show, where it's RAQ has plans. They're good plans, solid plans, but then she doesn't really share them with anyone else. She just waits until the moment to put them in place, and that's when she states them, just assuming that everyone else will follow her lead. Otherwise, RAQ seems to be raising him right. He's not out here super wild and rowdy or anything like that. Kanan's just a regular kid. He's dressed in pretty nice clothing, but maybe not quite at the level of this kid at his school, Buck 20, who happens to be dating a girl named Davina, who Kanan has liked since elementary school. The girl is nice to him and probably sees him as more as a friend than a boyfriend, and instead of just moving on and finding someone else, he continues pining after her. Story of the life of most teenagers at some point. In a neighborhood like this, where the kids are going to local public schools, they would have all likely known each other for years. There's his cousin Jukebox, who's quite the singer, and that's actually how she got her nickname. Singing in the school choir is her thing. So in addition to attending school with Jukebox, Kanan also has 2 or 3 other friends. Famous and aspiring rapper, and D-Wiz, a potential knucklehead. There's another kid, but he never says anything. It's telling that Kanan's mom sells drugs and keeps him in the latest, but not to the level of him being the big man on campus. He's just a regular kid. He's not rolling around with like stacks of money. At this point, we're introduced to RAQ's brothers, Marvin being her older brother that seemingly can't get right, and Lulu being the younger brother who's dependable and gets things done. Raquel is the middle child and the only girl. But right from the beginning, you get a feel for this relationship, right? Like Lulu is her right-hand man. You would think that the older brother would be the one in control. They'd be working under him. But Marvin is a ne'er-do-well, so RAQ is the leader instead. Marvin is still a part of the business, but he doesn't figure into the business in a way that might be expected. He's high up in the organization, but he's taking orders from RAQ just like everybody else. During this very first meeting between RAQ, the brothers, and some of their workers, we realize that there's like problems in the business. They're not necessarily struggling, but there's some issues and problems for them to overcome. Other people are moving into their territory. One of the workers is shot by a local rival dealer. They just have like a bunch of different issues going on at the same time. Meanwhile, Kanan and his friends have this like little pizzeria spot where they hang out after school. It's directly across the street from the corner where Buck 20 sells drugs. Buck is the sharpest dressed kid in school as he had access to his own money and is also dating Davina. There's a bit of jealousy towards this kid simmering in Kanan, and he seemingly has some of the things that Kanan wants: money, Davina, and being a worker for the area's largest dealer who's also a rival to RAQ's organization. Like, this is the guy that arranged for her worker to be shot, or his people shot RAQ's worker. This spells trouble as it kind of gets the gears turning in Kanan's head that if he can move Buck out the way and or get a similar position, he might be able to finally get Davina's attention and make her his girlfriend. Realistically, getting into it with this young dealer over Davina isn't the smartest move because he's connected. Also, because as Jukebox points out, Davina has known Kanan for years. She probably knows that he likes her, and if she wanted to date him, she would. But I could see a teen or even some wayward adults following Kanan's logic, contemplating selling drugs to afford fancy clothes or to impress someone that wouldn't want them otherwise, while completely overlooking all the dangers and things that could go wrong. Meanwhile, RAQ and Lou head to Manhattan to have a meeting to strengthen their relationship with Hugo. He's a guy who runs a club that they supply with drugs. Instead, they meet the club's loudmouth publicist Tony and her yappy little dog Bella. It's the middle of the day, but this loudmouth takes it upon herself to shout out to the universe that RAQ and Lou are the dealers who have been supplying the club, but she'll be using her supplier instead. Not only is she a loudmouth, but she's also condescending and seems to be directing a lot of that energy at RAQ. They get off to a bad start. Though I did find it funny that her dog Bella was also barking away at RAQ, and she was returning both the dog and its owner's energy by looking at them threateningly, like if looks could kill. But Tony being foolish results in Lou asking RAQ to calm down and step away to the bar. That leads to her meeting Mr. Symphony Talk Urban Planning to meet Basket. Symphony is working part-time as a bartender while working on his master's degree in urban planning. The two connect over the mutual dislike of Tony, but the mood shifts when RAQ actually looks at Symphony and recognizes that he is a fine specimen of a man. Her whole demeanor changes and she goes from being angry at Tony to being fun and flirty with Symphony. And thus, from hate springs the possibility of a love connection. Thanks, Tony, but I still can't stand you. The Thomas siblings and their kids have a weekly family dinner at a diner that's an agreed-upon neutral spot, so there should be no drama there. While they're chatting out front after dinner at the diner, Buck 20, of all people, rides by shooting in the air, seemingly to make a statement. Back at home, RAQ comes in and checks up on Kanan. He's a little bit shaken up. She looks to be shaken up as well. But, she reassures him that she'll take care of it. Everything's cool. He's concerned about, what if something happens to her? What then? She doesn't really have an answer because the reality is this is a dangerous line of business. She can't make any guarantees, right? But if need be, he can go live with his grandmother. She appreciates how serious things are, but him being a kid, he's just not getting it. And where she's trying to continue shielding him, keeping him away from what's going on, it's like he's making it his business to get involved, which is just a terrible idea. There are things that you do that you set in motion, right? Without you fully considering everything that's going on and just thinking for the here and now. These moments, these decisions can affect your foreseeable future for years, if not decades down the line, right? So side note here, but aside from that scene in 1985, you never really see RAQ wearing jeans, sweatsuits, sneakers, or anything along those lines outside the house. She's wearing the same outfit of all over black with the shirling from earlier in the day at dinner. Yet back at home, when she's telling Kanan she'll handle the situation and he should go to bed, she's wearing jeans. Like, madam, you've changed out of your outside clothes and are now wearing jeans as your comfortable around the way house clothes with a different pair of over-the-knee boots in the house. What is that about? Kanan goes hard on the bees in hopes of failing the entrance exam so he can stay in the neighborhood and continue attending his school, just doing everything possible to mess up. It's something that a lot of kids do because they lack life experience. You're not able to fully appreciate situations and to think, like, not just for this moment, but down the road, like 5-10 years. He's extremely impulsive and makes decisions and does things without thinking or fully considering the ramifications. Kanan, being a busybody, makes the foolish decision after seeing Buck selling on RAQ's corner to do something about it. And no, it's not like letting his mom or uncles know. It's literally him who is outside of the business doing something about it. No one asked for this. Him and his friend D-Wiz shoot and kill Buck, who they know from school, in broad daylight where other people see them walk up and hear Buck call Kanan by name. Nonsense like this happens when kids go to other kids for help solving the problems. Jukebox, who seems to be a bit more mature and often the voice of reason, is not there. Jukebox has met a young lady through singing that she's now interested in. This young girl lives out in Manhattan. But this is to show you, right? Like, in her own way, Jukebox is already branching out beyond the community. She's kind of forced to have a life of her own, or feels the need to have a life of her own, separate from her family that they don't know about, right? Like, this is a secret. Meanwhile, RAQ is doing everything possible to push Kanan out of the neighborhood, to inspire him to go and have a different and better life than what they happen to be having on the south side of Queens. He's doing everything possible to mess it up. Here it is that you have Jukebox, who does not have that support and encouragement from her father. He thinks like this life is perfect for her. You know, her mom isn't around, but she's branching out, doing her own thing. Kanan's dad also isn't in the picture, but he at least has his mom encouraging and looking out for him. Jukebox doesn't really have either one of her parents because her mom physically isn't there, and her dad doesn't seem to be there mentally either. Meanwhile, across town in Manhattan, we see that RAQ is out on a date with Symphony after they somehow connected and he asked her out. At first glance, you would think he doesn't really seem like the type, right? Like she would be his type and vice versa. He's not into street life, or at least from what we see of him, he's not into any of that stuff. He's just a regular guy. You know, but he's handsome, she's pretty. I can see why you'd want to date her, right? But she expresses that it's been a while since anyone's asked her out because in her line of business, it's not something a lot of people can deal with or a lot of people want to deal with. They have this conversation and he tells her a little bit about urban planning, which is what he's studying. He explains to her about Robert Moses, who's this guy that helped to plan the city, essentially the architect of the city, the designer of New York City and its surrounding suburbs. I think him being different is what attracts RAQ, or at least is what keeps her attention. He's a handsome man, so you can see why she would be physically attracted to him. But him being smart, and as she explains, she likes guys that they think bigger than her, right? Like she's a thinker, and I think she respects people that are thinkers as well, right? You see that and throughout the series, you come to realize that she is attracted to guys that can teach her something, right? That they can share a different perspective with her. Instead of wanting someone exactly like herself, she's attracted to men that see things differently, that are a little bit different from her, just as smart, but different perspective. RAQ doesn't really seem to like this life that she's living. I don't think that, just a dream that she expresses about Kanan, it sounds like that's probably a dream she had or has for herself. Given the opportunity, given the chance that Kanan has, she probably would have taken that for herself. If she had the option to go to school and to not be selling drugs when she was younger, she probably would have done that. So to be with this guy, to be dating this guy who has a life that's different from hers, that she can learn things from, it's refreshing to her. She finds it attractive. He's smart. He's handsome. He's nice. It's like a combination of things that I think most people would be attracted to. But at the same time, I kind of ask the question, what exactly is it that draws you to RAQ? Right? We see her life and stuff like that. We know her family, but we don't know anything about Symphony. They're not necessarily from different places because we don't know anything about where Symphony is from or what his life has been like up to this point. But at least at this moment, they're leading completely different lives. Symphony is seemingly just a regular guy. He's not rich or anything like that. She probably has more money than he does, but I highly doubt that anybody is shooting at Symphony. You know, this is really just the first date. So they're getting to know each other. They might have had like a few conversations over the phone, but he knew from the moment they met with Tony and her big mouth blabbing that RAQ sells drugs. He showed that he's not like the kind of guys that she usually dates. And she's probably not the kind of woman that he usually dates. I think opposites can sometimes attract, but you need some kind of commonality to sustain things. So I was curious to know, like, what exactly is the deal with Symphony? So he mentioned Robert Moses and that this guy kind of tears up the city to create this vision that he has, right? He sees it as that this Moses guy destroyed the city. Well, RAQ sells drugs, and that's incredibly destructive to individuals and also communities. So as someone that cares about communities, that cares about families, but yet you're dating this woman, how do you square those two? Right? Something else that stood out to me was while RAQ was at the diner with her family, she invited Famous and his sister to join them for dinner as she was paying, right? While out on the date with Symphony, she ends up having to leave because of Kanan and his nonsense. But she goes into her purse and leaves behind money to pay for dinner, at which point Symphony expresses that he'd asked her out, so he felt that he should be paying, never mind that she had to leave early. She seems to be very used to paying for things, like handling situations and being in control. I don't think there's anything wrong with like a man and woman taking turns paying depending on the circumstances, but why is it her default to pay? So pretty much Kanan is a moron, just setting this whole series of problems in motion because he made it his business to get involved in things that were not his business. He's perpetrating concern for his mom, and that's part of it. But the reality is, I think some of it has to do with jealousy about Buck dealing with this girl that he likes, which is a stupid thing to start all this drama over because this girl doesn't even really like him like that. You messed up all of this woman's business getting involved in stuff that you really have no business getting involved in for some girl that doesn't really seem to like you. And then once again, this nonsense with Marvin turned into Jukebox and asking her where she was when this foolishness was going on with Kanan and his friends. Like, why are you looking to Jukebox to save Kanan? Kanan is not a grown man, but he's not a little boy anymore. Why are you looking to Jukebox to protect him? Jukebox is not that much older than him. Where's the care and protection for her? Why is there this expectation that she's supposed to be looking after him? It reminded me of back when they were kids and Kanan was jumped at the park, where RAQ, sure, she comforted Kanan, but then she turned around and asked where Jukebox was when this was going on. Here it is, Marvin turns and asks, where Jukebox was when Kanan and his friends were being stupid and killing this kid over nothing. Why is Jukebox responsible for him? Kanan chooses to make stupid decisions. Hold him accountable for his actions. Don't look to Jukebox to save him. For someone who just a few scenes earlier had Scrappy microwave Tony's dog, she's relatively lenient with Kanan. I'm not for parents beating their kids, but I think she should have slapped fire out of Kanan for telling her that he's grown and she can't tell him what to do. This after putting everyone's life at liberty at risk. She's very restrained with Kanan in a way that she's not with other people. I think that's because that's her son, and so she tolerates things from him that, like, she lets a lot slide with him, some of which she really shouldn't. Like, he's completely out of pocket. Marvin kind of gets into the mix of things, because he questions her because she's given up the carnage to Unique. That's why Buck 20 was there. But Marvin is another one that kind of fails to see the bigger picture. He's so focused on the here and now, just like Kanan, that he doesn't realize that she's looking far down the road, years down the road. The two of them are just focused on this moment, both him and Marvin, and it's telling that he's an adult, but yet here it is that you're siding with this child. That should give you pause and make you think about things. We kind of start to see from this very first episode that RAQ certainly loves Marvin, but doesn't really respect him, or at least doesn't hold him in high regard. She seems very disappointed in him, she expects him to kind of mess up, and we kind of start to see some little bits and pieces of their history. In this case, that she's the leader because she sees Marvin as being unfit to lead. He's been in the position before and he failed on the job. He's not a leader. He can't run this thing that they have going on. But at the same time, I do find it telling that she shows some compassion, right? She's concerned about this other kid dying, right? Because That's what she refers to him as, right? She sees him as a child. Like, she's not worried about $120. She regards him as being a kid. She wasn't really paying him any attention. Even though he was the one that rolled down the street and shot in the air while they were like outside the diner, she didn't look to retaliate against him. She didn't even go to talk to him. Like, she looks at him like a little kid. Her and Unique talk. She's not going to talk to this little boy. She certainly didn't push Kanan into selling drugs, but at the same time, I think it's like she made him a little too aware of what she had going on. Right from the very beginning with her and High Post, they're at the house like packaging drugs, it seems like, sitting at the dining room table, right off the kitchen where he or Jukebox can come in at any minute. They're doing wrong, but if this is what you're doing, you should be a little bit more low-key with it. Like, why isn't High Post upstairs in your bedroom or something like that with the door closed, just in case these kids happen to come in, right? Like, you're making it a little too comfortable, right? Things are too out in the open. Either that or like you lock the door so they have to knock to come in. But I mean, look at Jukebox. She knows way too much about their business. And she knows like the details of like selling drugs and stuff like that. Where are you learning this stuff from? You know, that tells you that the adults have been too open about them. The kids have been too exposed. That becomes a problem because now Kanan feels like the little bit that he knows makes him ready to get fully involved. It's like he knows, but he doesn't fully know just how deep things are. Prior to this show, I'd heard the name Joey Badass, but knew absolutely nothing about the person. But I love this guy in the role of Unique, as he is very New York. Unique is a man, so it's more simple to dress him, and that probably gives him an unfair advantage. But he has the best wardrobe due to it being age-appropriate and consistently dope. His haircut is also thoroughly on point. Unique reminds me of like the Don't Be Cruel era Bobby Brown. For the most part, RAQ has some really good outfits, but others fall flat for me. I get the character's wardrobe being at a level above streetwear because she's a boss, but some of the outfits look better suited for a 50-year-old vice principal rather than like a 30-year-old drug dealer. Or just a 30-year-old. Not to mention that Bettina Miller is very slim and sometimes the hair is too big and the outfits aren't the perfect fit for her body type. They sometimes make RAQ look far too old for the age she's supposed to be. Lou wears the same thing, or at least the same boots seemingly every day. And while Marvin dresses nicely, his outfits sometimes look like the stuff my grandpa used to wear. It can look like RAQ and Marvin have been playing dress up in their parents' closet. But a funny thing that I picked up on was when like he's telling RAQ, like, you know, Kanan, Unique this is, being her son and being a woman in this line of business, that it's going to be problematic because she loves him too much. That her being a woman with a child is different from him being a man with a child, right? He refers to it as chemistry. And in like a kind of funny note, she corrects him that it's biology, right? This is like a little thing that you'll notice throughout the show where it's like he says things, it makes sense, but like the wording or the pronunciation is just a little bit off. But he actually makes a good point, right? Something that'll play out throughout the series. Towards the end of the first episode, you know, Kanan has shot this kid and things take a turn. There's some back and forth between Unique and RAQ, right? Because of Kanan's actions. Unique retaliates and it results in RAQ not just giving up some of the corners that she'd originally done, but now being forced to give them all up. It was like part of her original plan, right? Because of Kanan getting in trouble was to take him to his grandmother's house after like disappointingly realizing that he failed this exam on purpose. So that dream is dead. Imagine having a kid like this. Like I would want to strangle him because of his stupidity. Just the drama and trouble that he causes. It's like, here it is that she sacrificed all kinds of stuff, her life included, and he refuses to follow even basic instructions. All of this over some girl that doesn't even really like him like that. But RAQ is wrong because instead of actually taking him and sending him to his grandmother's house, because it's still not too late at that point, she instead takes him to teach him how to shoot, just making the problem even worse. The episode began with her pushing Kanan to stand up for himself. Over the years, she's taught him how to take care of himself at home, but now she's going to start teaching him how to survive on the streets. She was right in the playground situation, but wrong here as Kanan has started the drama. Unique makes a good, though sexist point, that she's a woman with a child and that bond is throwing her off. Had this been anyone else, she probably would have handled the situation with Kanan far differently, but she's letting stuff slide with him because he's her son. In a situation where stakes are this high, mistakes can be very costly. This isn't an area where you can afford to be off to any degree. So, you know, at the end of the episode, she points out Orion and being the hunter versus the hunted. That goes back to early in the show, right? Where it points to her interaction with Unique as well, and plays out over the course of the first season, where essentially Unique at this point at least is the bigger dealer. He's in a stronger position, and essentially he's trying to bully her, right? But she's refusing to step aside. She takes some losses along the way, much as Kanan did, but ultimately she's unwilling to back down. And we see in like later episodes in the same vein, she shows Kanan like, if your back is against the wall and the other person isn't playing fair, you're well within your rights to do the same. And we see how that plays out in her interactions with Unique over the course of the season. It kind of plays a role in like why she ultimately decides to not send Kanan to live with his grandmother. Essentially, she's taken a stand here as well for herself, but also showing him that neither one of them should allow anyone to run them off, right? They are hunters, not the hunted. Thanks for tuning in. This is the first episode, and I'll be, hopefully, fingers crossed, dropping a new episode every day from now until the season premiere. 1 down and 9 more to go, so be sure to check back tomorrow and every day after that as I count down to Raising Kanan's Season 2 premiere on August 14th. To ensure you don't miss any episodes, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell, and check out my Rolling with RAQ playlist. Go ahead and click that thumbs up button if you like what you saw, and go ahead and share it on social media as well. More importantly, drop a comment and let me know what you think. Are you rolling with RAQ or someone else?